What brought me to this work is deep suffering. Mostly it was revealing itself in my life as depression. I was on a search for many years before I met plant medicine. I didn't have my first experience until I was 36, so between 22 and 36. And psychedelics were never a part of my life. So I always have this inner giggle that I've been working with psychedelics and entheogens for so long because I'm not the traditional or typical psychonaut. But I was at the end of my rope and the end of the road, really, when I came to find plant medicine. Like it was a last Hail Mary, so to speak, just one last ditch effort. Maybe this will help. And it changed my life.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Psychedelic Conversations. Today, we have a very special guest, Ena Vie. She is the partner of Howard. I think you guys listened to Howard's interview about 2 weeks ago and you loved his conversation. So I think you're in for a treat. So stay tuned and welcome, Ena. So good to have you.
Thank you, Susan. It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for creating this time to be with us. So for our listeners, I will say a few lines from your bio, but then, as always, we will add everything to the show notes for them to get to know you a bit further. So you are a seasoned spiritual and psychedelic facilitator, musician, and teacher with over 2 decades of experience facilitating ceremonial experiences for a worldwide audience. You specialize in using presence and moment-to-moment awareness to guide individuals through the integration of psychedelic experiences. There's a whole lot more. You do Jungian psychology, shamanism, meditation, earth-based traditions, which I'm really interested in diving in to hear from you, actually, because you've been in the field for such a long time, and very curious. First of all, what brings you to this work?
The question for all of us, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. What brought me to this work is deep suffering. And mostly it was revealing itself in my life as depression and anxiety. Although since I've become a mother, anxiety has taken on a whole nother definition, caring for a human being. But yeah, I was on a search for many years before I met plant medicine. And since I was 22 years old, really, I didn't have my first experience until I was 36. So between 22 and 36, I was journeying, searching, learning, seeking, and diving into so many different paths and practices and finding a tremendous amount of healing, and yet still deeply suffering from this rift or tear from my family of origin when I left the religion at 22 years old. And so I was looking and seeking, wanting to find the earth to the sky gods that I had been presented my whole life, and wanted deep earth energy practices, whatever took me there. So I'll end that response there because there's so much to share, and clearly I can't cover it all, but that it just brought me to seek something more. And psychedelics were never a part of my life, and for that matter, drugs were never a part of my life. So I always have this inner giggle that I've been working with psychedelics and entheogens for so long because I'm not the traditional or typical psychonaut, experimenting at all. But I was at the end of my rope and the end of the road, really, when I came to find plant medicine. Like it was a last Hail Mary, so to speak. Just one last ditch effort. Maybe this will help. And it changed my life.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. That's very
Yeah.
profound. Would you say that because what I'm witnessing and observing is that most people who benefit the most are the ones that have the leverage. Exactly like you said, this was like the last thing, the thread, or the last thing of you know. And that seems there's something very unique in that experience. I feel that as opposed to somebody who's just exploring because it's a trend or because they heard, or even, let's say, let's be real, like we have couples who force one another right into it. I'm sure you hear all the time, or family members or parents dragging across their adult children into it because somehow they cannot manage or contain the level of anxiety that young people are having right now, as well as like so many different examples we can go into. But I think you understand what I mean. Do you think there's something there? Because the reason I say this, because it's almost similar to my experience, and I must have been living under a rock because I never heard of them when I was well into my late 30s. So which kind of almost defines my approach and respect in the way that I see medicine. So would you say there's something there for us?
I mean, each of us come to the medicine, each one of us comes to the medicine in a unique way. And I hear what you're saying and in response to that, we often say, "Hey, this isn't something to be curious about and to say, hey, what's it going to be like? I think I'll just try it because it's not like that." Now, for someone like me who didn't grow up in an environment or a milieu where drugs were even an option, it was a non-option. So I didn't even pursue it because it wasn't something that was allowed or acceptable in my upbringing. And my community supported that uh, to stay away from. And I'm not sure now, looking back, that I would have been really ready for it then. Uh, and the curiosity seekers sometimes have a more challenging time in ceremony because to have a clear intention, to have a deep desire to come home to the truth of who and what we are is is so important to have when we're stepping into these sacred circles and working with these master plants. Clearly, the plants are going to give us what we need no matter how we arrive. And there's no one right way to come to the medicine. However, as you mentioned, you cannot force anyone to come do the medicine. And I've noticed that when people are sort of dragged by a partner or a family member, that there can be even more resistance in the process because they don't want to be there. They're not ready to surrender. They're not ready to let go. Letting go is challenging enough for us as humans. So to not have that initial desire or deep longing to find greater connection or return home, that can certainly get in the way. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. That's so valuable. So one interesting thing I'd like to share with you is I did a little bit of apprenticing with medicine ayahuasca many years ago with a very sweet young indigenous lineage from South America, a woman from South America. She was very young. She was very honest, very direct. And I used to get really curious and ask her so many questions about this specific medicine. And I never forget the day she said to me, "You know what, Susan, she said, ayahuasca became a medicine when the Westerners discovered it, to be honest." So I thought that was really, really honest. She said, and I said, "So what did you guys do with it before?" And she said, "Well, there's a long tradition of ayahuasca being used for witchcraft, um, doing all kinds of other things, maybe not so positive. maybe even intention of harming one another. So I found that really fascinating. And this is like a least spoken topics in the medicine world, I think. So I'm happy to go there. If you have any insights, please share with us. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm so glad you brought it up. There's the medicine is utilized in so many different ways with so many different tribes, and I can't begin to point to each way in which a particular tribe who's been holding these sacred fires for so long, how they work with it. Some of the stories I've heard is that the medicine man or the shaman within a tribe was the one that ingested the medicine, and then someone who was suffering or ailing would come to them and they would do healing offerings to this person, and the person wouldn't take ayahuasca. They would come as a patient and receive the healing and leave. And to that point, it's the same. I walked the red road for many years, and the women would not do vision quests. The women wouldn't sit in the sweat lodges. We have our monthly lodge, the moon lodge. The menstrual cycle is our monthly lodge. And the going out and doing a vision quest or dancing in the sun dance and piercing the body, that wasn't for everybody. And now the same with plant medicine. Our culture is so disconnected from nature and our authentic nature that we need these powerful medicine plants to bring us back to our true self. It's not the only way. It's a powerful way. It's an accelerated way. However, we've lost the practices, the support within the community, our relationship to the seasons and cycles of life around us and within us. And so we're needing something to assist us in that return. However, as you said, these plant medicines aren't necessarily there, just like, if you will, I don't know if this is a good relation to correlate, but same with SSRIs. They're there for a moment. They're there to help lift us if you take them, but not to take forever, not to utilize all the time. Sometimes we need a lift. Sometimes we need a doorway to be opened. But the work, and so much of the work and our focus, Howard and I and our institute, is supporting people in living daily life with awareness, with presence, with attention, utilizing the gifts that we've received through the medicine and implementing them in our thoughts, in our actions, in our words. And that is, I found, the more challenging ceremony of all, is really bringing all of my attention to here and now. And so these different tribes too, they don't have the same Western overlay and cultural weight that we carry. And working with different tribes in different countries, both in North and South America, you see the overlay of our Western oppression and conditioning that I'm not saying they don't have. They have other things, but they don't have this Western oppression that we carry, the disconnection, the illusion of separation. And so, to speak to that woman who you were working with, it rings true. And plant medicines, there was a time where I didn't want to continue working with ayahuasca because I did see the dark side of the medicine, and I did see how different, circles and tribes were utilizing this medicine and sort of using, if you want to say, dark magic. Although really, I think it's just the distortion of the ego and power and control. It has nothing to do with the medicine, because I did take a pause from working in the medicine years ago after I witnessed a lot of sexual abuse and misuse of the medicine and power. And I said, I don't want any part of that. If that is what this is about, I want nothing to do with it. And yet, over time, the medicine was revealing to me, if you will, that that's not the medicine. That's the human overlay. So while the medicine is being used perhaps in a detrimental way or in a harmful way, which it can be, that is not the medicine. The medicine is here to bring us home, to illuminate where we are disconnected, remind us of our true essence, our true self. And yes, sometimes that can feel relentless and fierce and overwhelming and frightening. But that's just our own fears in the way, our own patterns, our own projections that I know I have often placed on her, on grandmother. And over time, as we peel away the reality, or I should say the illusion to reveal the reality of what is, I can begin to see, oh, that was me projecting my pain, projecting my patterns, projecting my conditioning and trauma onto the medicine or even onto facilitators. And so, yes, within every practice, within every culture, within every business institution, there's going to be shadow, there's going to be human imprint for sure.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your valuable insights on this. Um, I'm a huge believer in being very transparent and direct, and maybe go to places that are, not so trending at the moment. And I'm with you on this. I think it's the human condition, right? It's the human condition. And as Stan Grof says, these are non-specific amplifiers after all. So in the hands of somebody who's having a negative intention or shadowy personality or traits, of course, it's easy to then manipulate it into that direction. And then opposite is also true. This kind of leaves us in a very complex territory, Ina. I'm not sure, how do you feel about that? For example, there's division within the psychedelic space as well. I'm sure you know. So what I'm observing is, for our listeners, in case you're not in that bubble. So I feel like I'm in this psychedelic bubble, where I feel like I'm just observing this space, and I often see, for example, there's some people argue that these medicines should only be taken alone. And then there's whole, the medical side saying, no, 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 you need a therapist, you need somebody, a guidance, a therapeutic approach. Then we have the indigenous, then we have the shamanic, then we have like all different approaches in holding this medicine and facilitating. But the complex territory is that we need facilitators, but a lot of people against. So just to simplify it, I'm kind of like pondering a lot more on this one, because okay, we don't need facilitators, fine, fair enough, but the medicine doesn't do it, right? Medicine doesn't alone is not enough. I mean, there are rare cases that we have these miraculous, experiences of people where they just go into mountains, take a medicine, and then boom, they're into alignment. But it's not the same for everyone. So the facilitator then, depending on their experience, their capacity, their efficacy, their wisdom, and all of that then gets infused into the experience and the space holding, right? Would you agree? So all these complex threads, but just start wherever you feel like you want to.
Oh, there's so much there, Susan. I mean, from, early on, very early on, Howard and I knew that it was important, if not imperative, for us to make our own medicine. So we make our own medicine. And we're one step away from growing our own medicine. And growing the medicine is a whole lifestyle, and we honor the farmers that do, and we realize that that's not our calling. But we make our medicine on the land where it's grown. We were actually the first people to make medicine on the land where the plants were grown. And we pray with the medicine, and we pray for all the people in our community and tribe while we're making the medicine, and we're singing songs, and we're meditating or breathing or paying attention and listening. and feeling the environment of where the plants grow, being poured into the prayers also, and all those who are going to come. And then, there's the container, and setting the intention, and the safety and the space for us and our own practice and all those who come sit. Sitting alone has never been a desire for me for many reasons. And I know that in some traditions, in indigenous traditions, they don't sit alone either. Some do, sure. Howard and I, because we've worked together for so long, we help each other see where the other can't. So we have different gifts, if you will, or perspectives during the work, and also just the essence of ourselves that we bring to the relationship and to the plants and to the circle. So sometimes during a ceremony, Howard will say, "Hey, are you feeling this, or are you seeing this?" And I will either say yes or no, or I'll pause and tune in. And he, and vice versa. Sometimes I'll see something that's coming into the circle and he's not seeing it, or I can work with some plants and sing to what is arising. If I were to do it alone, it's not to say that I can't, but to have that trusting partnership where we're not just co-facilitators, we're also married, we're parents, we're co-producers of music, we're dancing in this field that is multi-layered. And so our relationship goes very, very deep, the trust between us and the trust with our plants. Howard will be dieting with the plant. I'll be benefiting from his diet because we're connected. It's so beautiful. And at the same time, I remember there was these young women who came and sat with us. They were from Hawaii, and they had been drinking grandmother alone, and they weren't sure they wanted to sit in a group because they said, they had their relationship with the medicine, and I don't doubt that they did. But after they sat in the ceremony, they said, "Oh, I don't think we've been drinking ayahuasca." Because, they were receiving what they needed, but to the depth of where they went and could go within a container that was cared for and prepared and steeped in deep experience and deep trust and relationship with the plants, and then to have that support carried on afterwards in their integration and the relationships that we build with people. I can't speak for everyone, and I can't speak to every medicine, and there's certain medicines that can be done alone. I don't recommend first time out going to take a medicine plant alone. That's just my personal perspective. And sitting with so many different elders and traditional knowledge keepers, I worked with many, and I pursued my master's in Indigenous Science, working with Indigenous elders from all over the world. And all of them continue to point not only within, but also in leaning into the ancestral wisdom and container of those who have walked before us, those who are walking with us, those who will walk long after we're gone, that there's no linear time. So you're falling, you're leaning into that. And at the same time, to have a guide, not to tell you what it all means, but to guide you, because the ego is so tricky. It's so slippery. The personality, the ideas that we have. I can't tell you how many times people will say to me, "Ena, the medicine has told me not to have any more medicine during a ceremony." And I will speak right back to that and say, "That's not the medicine speaking. You're here to take the medicine. The medicine will not say, stop taking the medicine." I mean, unless you are deep in the journey and you are deep in your work, then it's clear you don't need more medicine. But if you're in your head trying to figure it out, and to not have that reflection or support, certainly I'm not saying I make everybody drink more medicine. I just mean that there's that reflection, and someone who has perhaps walked a few steps down the road. It doesn't mean that a facilitator knows all the answers or has all the right ways of doing it. No, we're human, fallible human beings. And at the same time, there is this surrender to, especially with, and most specifically and importantly, someone you trust and comes from a good referral, and you know that they have experience and they have, their intention is to be of service. There's so many layers to it, but I think, if I dare say, it's a bit cavalier to just, say, I'm going to take this medicine. I don't know anything about it. I'm just going to go do it. Or I've done it a few times at a party, or I've been at a few festivals, and now I'm going to do it by myself. There's beautiful practices, especially in vegetalismo medicine work, where you do diet with master plants and you work with them individually, and you get to know them. And so I'm not speaking to that, but with these master plants, it's sort of like when people come to the medicine and they come up to drink and get their dose, and they say, bring it on. I'm like, do you know what you're actually saying, to the cosmic universe? Bring it on. I don't think my ego really knows what it's actually saying. It's like my 8-year-old saying, I'm going to be an astronaut. And I just say, great. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. But he doesn't fully understand what becoming an astronaut really means right now. That doesn't mean that the desire is wrong or right. But to have that guide, like as a parent, to say, I think that's great. And then if he wants to keep doing it, then you take steps to learn more about science and space. And maybe one day he will be an astronaut. It's the same in ceremony. There's this inner younger being that is looking for that connection and thinks that it knows how to get it. And when we peel these layers away, well, therein lies the connection, because we are the connection. However, to determine which voice is speaking, is it the voice of wisdom and essence, or is it the voice of my personality and patternistic behavior? That's where it's good to have a guide.
And that's where it's at. That's exactly the discerning element that, a lot of people talk about healing trauma, turning clock back, and maybe becoming a clean slate. But actually, the whole point of this work is to cultivate discernment. Exactly like you said, that's always felt true to me, to be able to differentiate
Yes.
what is my ego, what is my essence, what is my gut, what is it that I am, intuitively know, and what do I trust? How do I cultivate my own inner trust, right? So I think this is why we do medicine. Nothing else. That seems to be for me anyway.
Well, to get still is very difficult, especially when one is in deep suffering, like myself. I couldn't turn off the mental waterfall that was just consuming me, and it was a deluge in every moment. I couldn't find my way through. I'm wearing a dark shirt today, but my closet used to look like a funeral closet. It's just all black, and I was just consumed by my pain and believing that my pain was me. And that's where that can get very tricky, especially in healing trauma. One of the things I found, particularly around healing trauma, is that often it can be very difficult and painful to let go of the way in which I grieve about the trauma, because that has been a protection for me all these years. So to let that go feels like I'm letting go of what happened to me. And yet, what happened to me is a wound that can be healed, yes, but there will always be a scar. And I always say, and this is true, scar tissue is stronger than skin. So to obliterate the scar, or to say it never happened, or I'm totally free of it, I think is a bit untrue, because it did happen to me. Now, the difference with healing is, do I allow that to determine my everyday actions and thoughts and reactions even? Or do I allow that to continue to be a gift of an invitation to awaken now. Oh, this pain is coming here. What is this here to teach me? Oh, I want to, really react to my son. He's acting out right now. What is this here to teach me? How can I utilize my own fear of yelling and rage that I grew up around that's very triggering for me? How can I work with that and recognize, maybe to step back, take care of myself before I engage with another person, my son or my partner or another human being in our community or beyond, something on the internet, is my reaction, right? Versus stepping back, pausing, listening. It's the same in ceremony and medicine work. I'm listening to things going on in the room as a participant, perhaps. It could be very triggering. Someone's crying, someone's throwing up, someone's wildly releasing. That could be really deeply triggering. And then I want to close down, or this medicine's not for me, or I don't want to be here. So it's so important to have the breath, to pause, to come into the body. Where is that tension in my body? Let's breathe into that. Not to get rid of it, not to pretend it's not there, just to be with it. That is something that is, as I often like to say, that's not sexy, that's not exciting, that's not fun, but it's necessary to be with the healing that's asking for resolve or a salve of presence. That's what's needed. And it's not necessarily another ceremony, another medicine, another partner, another experience. Maybe, but I have found that it's really being present with what is being revealed, not why, but what. And then how do I face it? How do I meet it? Very, very different approach, at least for me. It's not unique. It's not like, oh, I've never heard this before. It's just I had not been presented with that. And when I began to be more present with what's arising, both in ceremony and in life, I begin to see other patterns at play and can respond in a different way.
I love these insights. Thank you so much. So valuable. And also thank you for sharing your insights on the ethical guidance, the importance of a guide, and the trickiness of the ego and our imprints. So valuable. And I just want to say, I think it sounds like you've created an amazing balanced accountability with Howard together. Going into a session, I think accountability of like meaning not in that way, but I think you understand what I mean. Just kind of checking in with each other and just kind of closing the gaps that one may not see and then the other one can see, like just sharing gifts in that way. I think it's very powerful indeed. What I wanted to,
Well, we also, just to speak to that for
yeah,
briefly, that we both have also relationships with many plants. So we're leaning into one another. We're also inviting like an artist's palette. We have many, many colors. So there's never a time where I'm in ceremony and think, I know what's going on, or I know what this person needs, or I know what song to sing right now. It's a real deep surrender, in a way, Ena stepping aside, and observing while the plants, while the songs, while what's needed for the room and the space can be offered, right? I don't even know. I couldn't begin to know what 20 people need, say. It would take me a lifetime, truly, just for one person. So, or maybe not a lifetime, but maybe many lifetimes. Um, and when I step aside, and that includes leaning into Howard and him stepping aside, there is this dance and weaving that occurs. And I know that in that surrender, we're not looking for the answer per se, or for, I'm going to heal this person, that it's really to allow the healing within the plants, within ourselves, within each other, within the sounds, within the silence, that it's here. we just need to step back and witness and listen, and it's here for each one of us. So I'm speaking to that too, because some people say, well, I don't want to guide, or I don't trust people. I understand that. I really do. I've been sexually assaulted in a medicine ceremony uh, down in southern South America. So and also in North America in some other non-plant traditional ceremonies. It is real. It happens. I'm not saying that it doesn't. However, or I imagine, I know that when someone's trustworthy or not, I can feel it in my bones. And until otherwise, I'm going to follow that. If I hear that someone had a bad experience, then I will take that into consideration in my choices. But I listen to my own inner guidance. Is this person someone that I can trust and surrender into this healing space, and know that I'm cared for in a what's the word, with integrity, that I can trust their intention. And that then allows for each one of us to really deeply surrender. And I have that trust with grandmother. I have that trust with the plants that I work with. I trust what they're guiding inherently. And that's after years of working with them, drinking them, listening to them, being a student always to the plants, the infinite intelligence of the plants. I'm a student forever.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And what are your thoughts on, for example, when people are at the end of their wit and they cannot discern or even know when, if, it's not even because they come to it from a desperation, because there's a pressing pain and they just want to take the medicine. Because obviously we have now media that is kind of promoting as a, you take one dose, and we have documentaries that kind of promote similar, and we have vulnerable people out there desperately just trusting anybody only to be re-traumatized, right? So would you agree that sometimes I guess this is, we can't answer this, but it's just good to probably bring it to our audience awareness, because this is also true, uh, that people come in with such a desperation, the checklist goes out the window whether they could trust the person or not, right?
Yes. And I'm so glad you're bringing it up. The way that I came to the medicine, actually, I wasn't even seeking the medicine. I didn't even know it existed. So it was interesting. I was at my wit's end. How I met Howard, who's now my husband, as a music producer, and we were in LA, and I was coming to produce an album, a music album. And in that process where we were working truly 60 hours a week together for a couple months as producer and artist, not together and romantically. And I was sharing with him because the songs I was writing were very personal and emotional and part of my life story. And so it was bringing up a lot of vulnerability for me, and I was crying in the studio, and as these songs, and sharing with him my life story, and also sharing with him my pain and how I wrote some of these songs. So there was this deep trust as friends and as co-creatives that was established long before he even told me about plant medicine or ayahuasca. And I was fortunate to have done a ceremony with just one. There was four of us in the ceremony. My first ceremony I did. And with all the things coming out of me, you would have imagined there was 45 people in the room. It was just a very intense journey that I went on. However, it was so safe and so gentle in terms of how it was presented, and also how I engaged with it. And not everybody gets that. I look back now, I feel like I just feel so lucky to have had that experience, and before it's all exploded as it is now. And to speak to that, though, for those who are desperate, who are listening to this even now and at their wits' end and don't know what to do, I would encourage anyone listening to this to stop and take a deep breath and feel the earth beneath your feet and know that you are, and I am, and we all are supported right now. And yes, there is pain, and yes, there is deep suffering. And in this moment, I am supported. I remember a dear friend and elder shared that with me when I was crying and just distraught. And she said that the mother is right. She's holding you right now. And that really opened up some inner light bulbs inside of me because I never thought of that in that way before, that the earth is literally holding me. Wow. I couldn't ask for a greater mother. And so to just pause and feel my feet on the ground, knowing that I am not only supported, but that I am guided to meet the right people, the right plant medicine, the right time, that if I trust, I put it out there to people that I know and love. Ask a therapist who's plant medicine friendly. Ask someone in your community that you love and trust. To go on the internet or social media and ask just anybody can be tricky. There are organizations that do all kinds of retreats all over the world. This wasn't happening 20 years ago when I first started doing medicine, and it's exploded so much in a beautiful way. The medicine is spreading rampantly because we need it. And yes, there are certain communities that we've heard many stories where, people just weren't supported in the best of ways or were, as you mentioned, re-traumatized. So to get still, to make that intentional prayer or desire known, put it on an altar, write it down on a piece of paper, bury it in the sand, um, breathe into it each day if this is the desire, because the plants are here and they're here to help us remember. So they're available. It's the humans, and there's so many good practitioners and good people doing this work. You'll find whoever's listening, you'll find that person or that group.
Amazing. Thank you so much. What a great gift, and so simple and such a gift, to be grounding in that. What I wanted to say is I wanted to ask you about the experience of the differences between males and the females, how they kind of commune or immerse themselves with the experience. Because you talked about surrender earlier. Sometimes it can be like a woo-woo word, what does that mean? Who are we surrendering to? Kind of inquiries like that. I was going to ask you actually, in your, such a long 2 decades, you said, right, this experience in the field, have you noticed any differences or themes among women versus men? I'm not trying to gender separate, but do you see any correlations, themes that come up among men who are working with the medicines as opposed to females? Anything that jumps out?
I mean, there's probably generalizations to speak to and point to. I don't know. I mean, I could speak to them here. I'm not sure how helpful that would be. Um, I do know that ultimately we're all coming to the medicine circle with the same intention. We've done it with Russian only speakers. Nobody spoke English in the ceremony. The medicine is, it's so beautiful. Or in only Swiss German, they're only speaking Swiss German. A couple people spoke English. Hilfe, we just said, just say Hilfe. We'll know what you mean. That means help. um, you know, we've done it with so many people from every continent and and every expression of gender And really, the end is, or if there is an end, the origin of desire is to come home, to remember. So, yes, often women in general maybe have more accessibility to their emotion and have more uh, permission, if you will, to cry. But not every woman, because some women grew up not being given permission to cry, and they stuffed and repressed their emotions. Same with men. I've seen men beautifully release and cry and be so vulnerable and transparent, just as women. And then there's other men who, have more powerful purges, but women too. So I don't know if it's really on that level. To be quite honest, in the ceremonial space, and this isn't to deny gender either, but it's less about gender. It only becomes an issue of gender if, for example, I'm working alongside somebody and it happens to be a male, and there's a moment where it feels like this person needs Howard's energy now. This male person needs a masculine energy. I'll call Howard over. And likewise, Howard has often been working with a woman, and he'll call me over because in that moment he doesn't want to have anything be misread or expressed, misunderstood. Maybe it's triggering for their background and trauma. So, it's really tending to the individual. We do something that I know not very many people do, and some people think we're a little more strict on this end of our ceremonial practice, but we do separate men and women for a few reasons, and mostly because of trauma uh, triggering. And just so many people come to this work who are deeply empathic, deep feelers, and have been experiencers of deep trauma and abuse. That being said, in this world that we're living in, which is becoming more and more fluid, that we have many people from different places on the spectrum of gender expression, and that's a case by case basis. And we often allow the person to sit where they feel most comfortable. In the end, and in the ceremony space, it's not like, well, I'm going to go work on this person because they're a woman, or Howard, you go and work on them because they're a man, or I'm going to sing to only the men right now, or only. It's so not limited in that way, even though we are in these bodies expressed in the way that we are. It just opens up into so much more because our essence is not limited to our human body, and yet it informs our human experience so profoundly. So I don't know if that answers your question, but there's so much to unpack, and I think it's a individual basis, I would imagine.
I love that. Thank you so much. Yes, it does. It does. Wow. Thank you so much for your wisdom, everything that you shared here. It's profoundly important and valuable, and I appreciate the work that you do. As we coming to the end of our conversation, I'd like to maybe ask you about your projects and talk a little bit about what's happening in your world, your projects, and your offerings, and also where can our listeners find you if they're listening on an audio, for example.
Well, thank you, Susan. I appreciate the opportunity. We, during COVID, when the world shut down and we weren't sure if we were ever going to do medicine again, we jumped online, which, coming from the deep underground we had been in for so many years, to show our faces on a video screen was nothing we had ever thought of before. But we started teaching online, and we started meeting our community in unpacking integration, really, in all the ways that reveals itself in our daily lives. And so many people in our community said this is just as powerful as medicine work for us. And so it was this reflection that we said, hey, it's time. And it's taken us until now, really. We established the Integration Institute of Psychedelics and Consciousness a year ago. We've been underground with that institute for about 4 years, but we came out publicly with it about a year ago. And actually, this Sunday, January 19th, we're starting our first inaugural cohort of psychedelic integration coaching certification and, wait, what did I say? the Psychedelic Integration Certification Coaching course. It's interesting to take all of these experiences, especially how I was trained in my master's program. We didn't write anything down. We learned from the oral tradition from so many elders. And that's so much how this work has been given to me and how it's been communicated and expressed in ceremony. However, we are in a very different time right now, and a time where many people need so much presence and support and guidance, both in ceremony, but I often say integration is 99% of the ceremony. So we've created this institute to support those who want to help others in integration. We teach different courses and offer one-on-one guidance and also ongoing mentorship for facilitators of medicine, because there is a need for elders. And I'm a baby elder. I'm stepping into this elderhood, and it's an interesting place to be. I feel like I'm at the beginning stages, and yet we hear so much need for guidance, and I'm here for that, and I know Howard is too. And we have music. We have a ceremonial music album that we recorded actually during COVID, and others. We have 4 or 5 other albums of our music, and we have a book that we're writing called The Integration Conversation. That's the same name as our podcast, The Integration Conversation. We talk about integrating psychedelics and all things around awareness and healing. And we'd love to have you on someday, Susan. It'd be great to have you as a guest.
Thank you
And
so
you can find us, you can find us at tiipc.com, the Integration Institute for Psychedelics and Consciousness.
I love that. Thank you so much. We'll have all the details in the show notes for our listeners that are interested. And I feel so comfortable and feel so warm thinking about that you two exist in the world and all the work that, and thank you for deciding to come from, come overground, come out. How do they say it? From the underground,
Above ground, come
above
out.
ground. Yes, please. Can you please do that? Because I think, like you said, we definitely need it now. And in this information technology era, I think it's going to be super helpful.
Yeah,
And
as Ram Dass says, we're all walking each other home, and we can reach more people by coming above ground. We can't go back underground now, but that's okay. This is our new guidance and our new calling, and we're just so grateful to be talking and to be sharing this with you and your listeners. Thank you so much for having me today.
absolute pleasure. It's such a great connections that we made. And one of my favorite things to do is continue the relationship, build that friendship, and continually have you and Howard back as often as you like or you have time for. Just continue growing together and sharing more and more and connecting further. So that's that I would like to do. So
We would love that. Yeah, we would love that. And
thank
answer any questions people have we'd love to do that too.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you again. Thank you everybody for joining us. Hope you guys enjoyed this session with Ena. And please do comment, share, feedback, and ask questions. You can reach to Ena and myself anytime. So don't be shy. And I'll see you on the next one. Thank you so much. Thanks, Ena. See you on the next one.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.